We are diving headfirst into a new project. We are getting a pool, but it's not just any pool, it's an above ground pool. Here's the twist. I'm on a mission to turn what's viewed by most as cheap and flashy and turn it into something that's elegant and classy. Join me as a first-time deck builder as I toe the line in every professional codebook to keep the cost as low as possible. Then brace yourself as I post it on r/decks over on Reddit. Then we will see what all the experts have to say about it. So grab your swimmies because we're about to dive into my attempt to elevate the humble above ground pool to the top of everyone's summer to-do list. With in-ground pools in my area ranging from $60,000 to $100,000, above ground was our only option. I can't say for sure how much this whole venture will cost me, but I'll keep a running tally on everything from the lumber to the pool and everything in between, and I'll share it all along the way and give a full breakdown at the end of the video, so we can see if it was worth the hassle or should I have just put in an in-ground pool after all. Of all the places to buy a pool, who knew that you could pick one up on Amazon? It's likely the reason this whole impulsive project started in the first place. I got the 12 by 20 foot Intex pool, and at the time it cost me $1,387. And that came with everything from the pool, a ladder, and the whole water filtration system. So let's get that running tally going so we can keep track of how deep this pool project will take me. Now that the pool is purchased and on its way, there is no turning back. First up, it's time for the groundwork. One of the most important parts of an above ground pool is preparing the site. It is recommended that the entire area is as level as possible. If not, you can have a catastrophic failure like this. So I think it's worth the time to do it right and put our investment on a good foundation. For where I wanted to put our pool, we first had to remove these patio pavers, and I was lucky enough to even have some help from some very eager kids when I told them it was so we could have a pool. Eventually they got distracted though, and I ended up moving most of the pavers up and out of the way, mainly all by myself. Then I took out the old staircase connected to our deck. I took out as many screws as I could find, but ended up cutting the stringers off with a reciprocating saw. And I'm going to save it as it might make for some temporary stairs until I figure out how to make some new ones later on. With everything out of the way, I set up a laser level and used a tape measure to figure out how much slope I am dealing with in this area, and how much digging I'll have to do to get it level and at the correct height to meet up with the original deck attached to the house. I started out by using a post hole digger to mark out some spots at the correct depth. And I am quickly discovering many roots and realizing how difficult this dirt is going to be to get moved. But thankfully another kid showed up and she is definitely giving it her best shot. With all of the roots and hard packed dirt, I ditched the normal shovel and had to opt in for this heavy-duty pickaxe to be able to tear into it at all. But this technique didn't last as long as I thought, as being into my 30s now, I'm realizing I don't have that quick recovery like I used to. As I was realizing how long this was going to take me, I decided to reach out to my sister who owns a tractor and asked if I could rent it from her. Being the amazing human that she is, she said her and her husband would bring it over and I could use it for as long as I needed without paying her a dime. They also have a YouTube channel over at Georgia Woods Homesteading. Please share the love, as this whole project never would have been possible without them. Now, I've never used a tractor like this, and I'm sure there are tons of you that could have done this whole thing in under an hour and had it perfectly level in no time. But I literally had no clue what I was doing. But let me tell you, getting to use equipment like this was one of the funnest things I have ever done. And it even had ice cold AC inside the cab. Even with the tractor, I was still getting stuck on some roots and still had to remove some of them with the pickaxe, or sometimes even my poor reciprocating saw. Sadly, I discovered a major tree stump that was going to be a huge problem. I did my best to dig it out with the backhoe attachment, but it was clear that this was not going to budge. And I even went a little bit overboard with the backhoe and went way deeper into the virgin mud than I should have, which is going to cause some issues later on down the road. The tree stump was originally ground down by a stump grinder, and you can even see where it was ground down. But it was just not deep enough to get it out of the way. I was desperate. I even decided I would sacrifice a chainsaw blade on my massive chainsaw to try to weaken it enough for the backhoe to maybe be able to rip it out. With many hours at it, it was clear I was going to have to get a stump grinder in here to finish it off. With all of the over digging that I did, it created a huge mud problem, as it was not properly graded to shed the water down and away from the pool site. And we got a lot of rain, and I mean a lot of rain. I essentially had created a pond now right off the backside of our original deck. And it was starting to stink too. This had to be fixed. Since it was way too wet to bring the tractor back in, I put on my mud boots and got in there with my hand tools again. And I tried my best to fill in the low spots and fix the grading to get the water to stop collecting. Eventually, we finally had enough dry days that I could go rent a stump grinder so I could get that tree stump removed. I was able to go pick one up at our local Sunbelt, and I rented it on a Friday and didn't have to return it until Monday morning. My only limit was not running the motor for more than 8 hours. This cost me $477 for the trailer, the stump grinder, and the rental protection plan. So let's add that to our running total. The stump grinder did great. I took it down into that stump as far as I could go, and even used the stump grinder to level out some of the dirt while I still had it. Now with it somewhat level, I went to Lowe's and picked up 24 blocks of concrete for $58. Originally, I would have only needed 18, but since I went too deep in some of those spots, I'm going to have to double stack some of the blocks so that it's not on squishy ground that will settle. I found a diagram online for the spacing of the legs of the pool and used this to map out where I needed to place the blocks into the ground. I left the blocks 1 inch above the ground level in the center so I could add 1 inch thick insulation foam to help cushion the bottom of the pool later on. In the area around the tree stump where I dug too deep, the ground would just not harden up properly. So I dug down until it was virgin ground, and then I could just double stack the blocks to avoid it settling from the weight of the pool legs. I purchased the straightest 16-foot 2x4 I could find to be able to help me visualize the high and low spots. This allowed me to finesse it to be as level as possible. When it got dark, I also brought out my laser level and was able to see where the laser would hit the high spots so that I knew where to break them down and spread them out to make it even more level. All the leftover clay and dirt I put behind my woodshed to maybe in the future have a raised pad where I could build a lean-to for some outside storage in the future. Lastly, I rigged up a pallet with some blocks to weigh it down and pulled it around like a mule to help get everything down and level. All of this was not an easy task, but I believe that after all of this work, the ground is finally deep enough, level, and ready for me to install the pool. The pool was delivered by a tractor trailer on a pallet, though the delivery driver was nice enough to haul it up the long driveway and ask me wherever I wanted it to go. Inside the big box was 2 separate boxes, so it was easy enough to move it around, especially if you have an extra hand. Now that the pool is ready to be set up, I first laid down my 9 sheets of 1 inch foam. This cost another $280, and then I taped the seams with 2 rolls of Gorilla Tape for $26. Then I swept it clean and laid down the tarp that came with the pool. Then I unloaded the pool on top of the tarp. Then I took the metal bars and slid those through the top rim of the pool. I added some Gold Bond powder to help slide them in, which made it much easier. This can be done with baby powder too, if they still sell that. The sleeves then slide over each leg. Then they can be snapped into the bars along the top rim. It's not easy, but with enough determination, the pool can be lifted up by one person. And then you can attach the legs to the bottom side of the pool with the sleeves. The blocks were off. Apparently, the online diagram I used was off on this model. If they were placed inward by about 3 inches, then they would have been perfect. Luckily, I think there is just enough contact for them to still work. I will go ahead and fill it up and hope that the legs stay on top of the blocks. While filling up the pool, I climbed in and did my best to press out all of the wrinkles. I was really surprised how cheap it was to fill up the pool. It only cost me about $34 for the 8,500 gallons to fill it up. I did not care how cold it was coming out of the ground. I was stoked to be able to take my first dip in the water after all of this work. I got the pump all set up, filled with sand, and running. They recommend you run the pump 6 hours a day with this size setup. Once it was filled up, I was so happy to see it was parallel to the deck within half an inch, end to end. And the water was level within 1 inch, so I would call this setup a success. Now, with the pool all set up, I can say it's just about as flashy as can be, especially with my run of AstroTurf grass leading around to the ladder. But regardless of how bad it looks now, that is not deterring the family from enjoying it. But remember, the goal is to take this from trashy to classy. So next, we are on to building the deck around the entire pool. I used my drone so I could fly around, get some pictures, and then I could sketch out the vision and plan out all the materials I would need. I was originally going to pay the $89 to have everything delivered, but my order kept getting delayed for weeks, until finally someone called me and told me their delivery trucks were broken. Thankfully, I'm lucky enough to have a Lowe's just 1 mile down the road. So I canceled my order, and I guess I'll be making lots of trips and collecting all the materials as I go. First up, I went and bought my post blocks in 4x4 post. I know these are not to code, and everyone will be yelling at me for not using 6x6s. But I'm copying the original deck construction used on the deck that was built prior to us buying this house. And we live in Georgia, so we don't have a frost line. And in all the years we have been here, this deck, though it is old and the top boards are due to be redone, the original posts and beams are still in place and seem to be doing the job just fine. I brought out my iPad with the layout on it to be my guide and placed the blocks around the worksite. I used a flat shovel and a level to get them all set in place where they would be. I also used a string line to make sure that all the blocks were placed straight in line and all had the correct spacing. I used my laser level again to help me mark the correct height and cut all of the 4x4 posts. These will later be what the beams will rest on top of. Anytime you cut a treated piece of wood, I heard that the cut ends are no longer protected. So I got a can of this copper coat that you paint onto any of your cut ends to help prevent rot. I was very liberal about using this on all of my cuts. I'm not going to show it in the video, but just know that everything did get coated. Now that the posts are all set, it's time to put up the beams. I'm using two 2x8s with no more than 8-foot spacing between the posts. I am using ring shank nails to put them together and toe nailing them down onto the post. Please keep in mind that the way that I am building this deck will most likely fail any true inspection, and this is by no means a tutorial on how you should build a deck yourself, especially if you are in a region that is susceptible to high winds. With the first beam up, I decided I would make a quick temporary deck for the kids, so they could enter and exit the pool without coming down into my construction site. I love that I get to watch them enjoy the pool while working on finishing this entire project. It's also super nice because every time I get too hot working out here, I can just take a quick dive into the pool and cool myself down. I lined up my joist hangers with the original joists of the other deck so that they would all be lined up. I wanted to make the two decks look as if they were all one in the end. With the joist hangers, I filled all the holes with 1.5-inch Simpson strong tie nails. I hope those were the right ones. These cost me $25. For the area around the gazebo, I found these 45-degree joist hangers that worked out perfectly in this spot. I have another staircase on the back side of the house that needs to be removed before I continue. Take a look at the fasteners used by the original builder on this ledger board. Some of the beams were different thicknesses, so I used an electric hand planer to flatten them down. I've been seeing a lot of hype over using joist tape. This helps preserve the lifespan of the framing under the deck boards, so I'm gonna give it a shot and hope it does help prevent future rot. Instead of cutting the length of each joist, I just toe-nailed them all in. Then I used a chalk line so I could cut them all to length, which made them all perfectly lined up. Some of the longer spans of the joist felt a bit weak when walking around on them, so I opted to put in some blocking in between them, and once they were in place, everything felt way stronger. Just like with the beams, I used a hand planer and a long level to find the high spots and got everything as flat as possible. Now with the joist ready, I also added joist tape to the joist to help prolong the life of this lumber. Now with the major framing done, I went to go get the materials for the railing. Railing post to be to code is to be spaced out 6 foot on center, so I made all my marks and started to get them placed. I wanted to leave some 8 foot tall for something later, and all of the others are cut down to 4 foot. Around each railing post, I added blocking, used shims to get them level, and used 8-inch and 5-inch flag screws, which are made for long, strong connections. It was so hot out here, I could literally see the sweat pouring out of my pores. Yet again, thank the Lord for this pool, as I could easily have a quick break and take another swim. I went to Lowe's again to get some of the decking boards late at night, about an hour before they closed. My cart was loaded down, and for some reason they closed down the lumber side checkout early. So I had to push my cart with 16-footers through the entire store over to the self-checkouts. It was hilarious. But this is what the staff wanted me to do. Every 16-foot decking board takes 34 screws. This takes forever, especially when fighting to pull the board straight and wanting to get an even gap. Norman, my hairless cat, would come downstairs every morning and just sit and stare out the window and watch me work the entire day. His face definitely had the look of disapproval. It was time for me to remove the temporary deck that I made for the kids to get in and out of the pool, and also the original railing. I also wanted to open up the feel of the gazebo. Now I know I'm taking out a load-bearing post, but I'm going to take the risk. I knew it would come down a bit on this side, but it really only came down about 1 inch, and if it really does fail eventually, I hope no one's standing underneath it. I wanted to add a pool skimmer to the pool to help with keeping the surface clean. I found a skimmer that people have been putting on their pools, but with the sloped sides of the pool, I just didn't like how they were looking. I decided this would be the perfect application for the 3D printer. I modeled up a design, laser cut some gasket materials, cut the hole in the side of the pool, and got it all put together. Now when the pool pump is running, the leaves, bugs, and debris is all collected into the skimmer basket. Another product I decided to try out is a solar cover. Apparently these can help retain heat, stop evaporation, and extend your swim season. It's a little bit of a hassle to deal with, but you can also get one of these roll-up holders, which makes putting it on and off much easier. At the ends of the deck boards, I used the chalk line trick again to get all the boards cut to the same length. The last load of deck boards just about killed my truck. It tweaked the tailgate cables, but surprisingly, with some slight adjustments, I was able to get it back to being functional again. I gotta say, this has been a great work truck. One of the beams was left a little too long, and since I already built up on top of it, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to use the new electric chainsaw. It was not the cleanest cut, but it did get the job done. I used my speed square to create a gap between my boards. Even though they will shrink as they dry, I like big gaps, especially since the original deck was built with deck boards pushed together, and now it has many spots where there are no gaps and it collects and holds water. I'm sure this has to do with why a lot of the boards on it are failing and needing to be replaced. I used my router to round over all of the cut edges to make them nice and safe for the kids. I wanted some pool steps that would keep a low profile because eventually I plan on making one of those sliding deck covers that can slide over the entire pool when it's not in use. This will have to come in a future video as I'm still trying to figure out the best way to span that 24-foot gap from end to end. For the railing caps, I used 2x6s, and they were really rough, so I got out my sander and smoothed them out the best I could. For the railing, I knew it would be easiest if I went ahead and sealed them with the deck stain before putting on the metal balusters, so I did that to the railings and the post before assembling them. I found some gate hardware on Amazon for a gate, and it went together pretty well, though the metal was not perfectly square and definitely needed some adjusting. Kids love leaving doors and gates open, so I found this little spring-loaded automatic gate closer, and these have worked out great. I even put some of these on some of the doors to the house. The balusters sit on these plastic nubs, so I spaced them out, making sure to have less than a 4-inch gap between the bars, as to stick within the decking code. The balusters I bought were the cheapest I could find, but sadly the lengths of them are not all the same, so I had to bring them all to the chop saw and cut them all down to length. I had some temporary railings set up for the kids' safety, but now that the permanent railing is ready, I can go ahead and remove all of these boards. The top railing had to be marked out and cut to go around the post. I did all of this with my speed square, circular saw, and jigsaw. I wanted to cover all of the tops of the post to help prevent rot, and I found these solar light post covers, and they have worked out great and add a nice touch at night. Now it's time to finish staining the deck. I found this awesome 6-inch brush you can put on an extension pole, and this makes staining a deck so quick and easy. No more bending over, you just dip it into the bucket and spread it out. I am using Deck Correct Finish, which is normally for restoring old decks. I had already used it on the original deck, so I figured I would just use the same color. And the opaqueness of this stain, though it hides the wood grain of the wood, I believe it does make for the longest lasting finish you can get. Now that I see how good the new deck looks compared to the old one, I'm kind of thinking I should have just ripped all of that out and started fresh. But for now, I'm just going to remove the boards that need to go and restain them and hope it blends in good enough until I'm ready to tackle redoing the original deck too. Now, I still have more to do. I need to add the permanent staircases, deck skirting to go down and around the outside, and eventually I will make that giant 12 by 24 foot sliding deck cover. But for now, let's take a look and I'll let you all decide, was I able to take the humble above ground pool from flashy to a whole new realm where we could maybe even call it classy? Let's jump over to the dark side of the internet and see what some of the fine people over on Reddit have to say. Future Performance said, "I'm not going to rip apart your deck. You'll be doing that yourself in less than 10 years. LonnieBoy01 said, "Not bad for DIY, but would have liked to see poured footers." Unusual Monitor said, "Looks like you took a lot of care and were thoughtful throughout each step. Congrats." Then the Barn Dog replied, "Except not building a foundation." Then Cities Liker replied, "Except fixing the stairs. Skipped those steps." Novel Long Jumping said, "Should last a day at least. Nice." Successful Giraffe 29 said, "It hurts my eyes." TCLI64 said, "Put a hot tub on it and you'll be good to go." Tacos of Injustice said, "I rolled my ankle just getting to these comments." Naples Sun 86 said, "Carpenter here. I like it for DIY." Effective Ladder 758 said, Mate, this actually great. I hope it lasts a long time for you and your family. Stay safe, no running when the floor is wet. Good job. And Few Drama 9767 said, I pray no one dies. These were just a few of the ones that were appropriate enough for my channel. If you want to go see the rest, I'll have a link to the Reddit post so you can go see it all for yourself. The majority are saying overall pretty good work, but they would have preferred to see poured footers with 6x6 post. In the end, I was trying to keep it as cheap as possible. So here is the price breakdown into a few different categories. The pool cost $1,387. It took $35 worth of city water to fill it up. All of the building supplies that I got came out to $4,349. Then I spent another $812 on pool and deck accessories. And lastly, I have to put in the $477 for the Stump grinder rental. So give or take a few, I have put in around $7,060 for this pool and deck setup. Thank you for the amazing support you all have given my channel by watching till the end, like you're doing here. I want to continue to show my true appreciation by giving back to you all. I selected a random person from my last video that commented the code word coconut. And that winner is IO Error 622. Congratulations! I am sending you my X-Tool D1 laser machine. I still have another laser to give away to all of you beautiful people. It's just a 5-watt diode, but for your chance to win, comment the code word cannonball. Again, that word is cannonball. Time will tell if this deck will hold up in its current state. If not, I would love to do a follow-up video showing what happened and how I plan on fixing any issues that might arise. Let me know what you think, and I hope you tune in next time to see where else I can take this project.